Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another Supercoach Insider podcast. My name is Swiz, here with the third edition of my AFL Supercoach Preseason team discussion series. Now that the community series is finished and we're only one day out from round zero, there was a perfect time for me to jump on and talk about my team. But before I get into that, as always, check us out on all our social media platforms, in particular YouTube and Spotify. Get in contact with us via Twitter, Supercoach Insider 100 or Swiz26. Thank you to everybody that has been messaging, asking when is my third team reveal coming up. I've been trying to hold off as much as possible just because there's so much information that's been sort of coming out because of the community series and injuries. And also, I have been a little bit busy. I've got my cricket top on at the moment. My boys Parkfield, we're into the grand final this weekend. So that has been taking up my weekends when I've been trying to mix that with watching footy and getting down to games. Also, the natural thing with work. But then on top of that, I am now one of the experts for the Herald Sun Supercoach this year. So thank you to Al Patton and the team for getting me on board with that. I just wrote my first article for the Herald Sun in regards to AFL position changes and what that means for Supercoach this season. So if you haven't read that, please check that out. And we had an exciting night last night, the Supercoach launch. So all the Herald Sun boys, all the Supercoach and AF content creators were down there. Some really good minds in the room. A couple of former AFL players in Heath Shaw and Lee Montagna. So it was just a great night talking Supercoach, which is what we all love. So it was interesting to get some of the other guys' ideas. There was a lot of similarities what we had. There was a few differences, and we all put our cases over for why we're picking certain players. So I'll share a couple little things that came out of that throughout this video. All right, so the first one for me today, now I said at the start of the preseason, there was about 80 players I was looking at. I think I'm down to about 50. There's a few 50-50 calls that I'll make depending on what happens in round zero. So the first one is Nick Daicos. The biggest worry I had originally there was he was going to get tagged. It seems like the same thing's going to happen as it does every season. Clubs are going to back in their systems, and it usually happens the first 4 to 6 weeks, and then players like Daicos and your Lockie Neals in the past just get off the chain, and then you have the media calling saying, why aren't you guys putting a tagger in? Especially Kane Corns is usually a big one for that. And then what happens is they start getting tagged, and it works once, so other teams start doing it. Daicos just showed the other day 57% game time against the Tigers and still turned up. Pretty sure he's getting the Bont favoritism now, where he kicked the ball to Daniel McStay in the crowd and still got points for it. But the kid's just a gun. He's owned by 72%. You can see the percentages on the side there next to how many games they played last year and their average. There is maybe a little bit of meat on the bone just because of that injury affected score against the Hawks late in the season, which probably ended up costing him the Brownlow. So I'm happy to have one premium from each of these buy rounds if need be, and Daicos is definitely the one. And I say that without sort of taking the Rucks in consideration. I kind of think they're their own thing, but best 18. I'm happy for a Daicos who could potentially on that average of 116 go 120 during these rounds. And the week he misses, if I get a 60 to 80 off my bench, well, that's great. But nearly everybody's going to be in the same boat anyway, so it's not going to affect me too much. The second player is a bit of a 50-50 call. It's between Stewart and Houston for this role. At the moment, I have Houston. He's barely left my side. I do like Tom Stewart. I do see the appeal. There could potentially be growth there because of he scored an 18 last season. The thing I do like about Houston, though, it's 8 of the first 10 games at Adelaide Oval. They've got a really good draw. Even a couple of their away games, it's like Richmond at the G and North Melbourne out at, I think that's down in Tasmania. So I'm not really worried too much about a couple of their away games. They've got a period there where around 3 to 5, they play 3 games in a row at Adelaide Oval, back-to-back games around 7 to 8. They're not going to be leaving home too much. And he put up some monster scores at home last season. Not a lot changed in that preseason game. We got to see the same thing, but if you look through some of those preseason scores, some of those last year scores at Adelaide Oval, the 110, 123, 122, 128, 112, 146, 120, a 122, a 128, and a 109, and a couple other scores at around the 90s mark. So, the guy just loves playing at home, and like a lot of players, in the system, so it's really hard to ignore that. He is a big pod. He's only at 10%, which is compared to Stewart, who's now dropped down to 29%. The thing with Stewart that I'm a little worried about is firstly Max Holmes, who I wrote about in the article the other day, now moving to half back. Does that take points away from him? And also teams are looking at strategies of saying hitting players out from 45 to 60 out instead of just bombing it to 30 out, because that's where Stewart and Sicily do their best work among a few other defenders. So teams are trying to combat that. And you even saw in the practice match, like St Kilda were taking shots, even though they had a big win behind them, but from like 50, 60 out, like you're getting those likes of Wanganeen, Malira, Nick Martins, Jaden Shorts, players who can like bomb the ball and from half, run up from half black. Houston's another one, and and kick long goals from that sort of 50 to 60 range, and then it just nullifies Stewart, Sicily. Yeah, okay, they're going to get the kick-outs if they miss, but if they're on range, it can be really effective. So that's kind of why I'm leaning towards Houston over Stewart at the moment. Also taking account with Stewart, because it's a bit of a comparison between the two here. We all know how good he is at Geelong and as well at the MCG, but this year they do start with 3 games away in their first 6. He's notorious not have great record on the road, Stewart. So yeah, they've got Geelong round 1 against the Saints where he could go massive, but the Crows, the Doggies and the Lions all in those first 6 games does have me a little bit concerned there. Potentially, I think he could start the year slow and then build into it. So that wouldn't surprise me at all, and that's what I'd be hoping for. So that's kind of why I'm hedging my bets there, and I'll go the more pod player. The third one is Hayden Young, the Fremantle, now midfielder. So we saw again in that preseason match, he had the highest CBAs on the ground. He was in there of 20. He's an absolute tackling machine, Young. So in 42% of teams, we know what he did on the run home last year. No surprise, he is so highly owned. We kind of wanted to see it in the practice match again, and we got exactly what we expected from him. So probably the one thing fantasy stats wise, because as I said, we know he can tackle. I've mentioned it a few times, but in those games, he had 7, 8, 10, 5, 8 tackles on that run home when he was just going ham. But it was finding the ball. There was probably one game where I think he had over 22 possessions. But yeah, in the preseason practice match, had no problems finding the ball, even with Fife, Sarong, Brayshaw in there. It looked like Brayshaw even played a little bit more out just to accommodate Young. But yeah, 26 touches, 7 tackles. I don't think he's going to have 5 shots on goal all the time, but it was good to see him actually getting up the ground and being more attacking, which is obviously good for Supercoach. So I think there's a bit of thought to the future there. And though Fife, there's no reason why he couldn't play, 20 games and dominate again. I think we're all thinking at some point he's probably going to get down, which is just even better for Young. So I'd rather start him than not, because I think he at 525, it's not like he's going to lose value, at least there. It's just about how many points can he get to sort of stay up with the top. But if you take into account, it's going to be Daicos, Stewart, Houston, Ryan, potentially Sicily. We're not too sure how he's going to start the season there, but you've sort of got 4, maybe 5 guys with those premium numbers. There's definitely room for a guy at D6 to, it might be just a flat 100 this season. And that was sort of similar to last year. You only have to look at the 7th best defender with Nick Newman at 102, and even Sheasel, who we're hoping will continue to rise, but he was at 99.5 at 8. So of the guys that we've got the option at this year. So there'd be, I think Young, if he could improve to, even if it was 105 average, that would be brilliant, and he'd be up there as one of the best defenders anyway, and we're getting that value. The 4th player on my list now, I know quite a few people have been looking at Elliot Yeo, has tempted me, have played around with him in the side because of the value. He is playing a lot of midfield. Still might happen for me, but I hate really picking those guys who are massively injury prone, who are, kind of more top value. I'm more willing to take the risk at guys at the 200 mark like that. And I sometimes think, where can you go? Maybe there's a little bit more of an option with Yeo this year, because he is got the option to, if he was to get injured, say round 3, you could go to a Kitty Coleman, who looks the perfect player for North Melbourne. Yeo's still only in 9%, so the ownership, if Yeo was 25-30%, I'd be more willing to go there. So at the similar percentage is Nasiah, Wanganeen, Malira. So he is in my team. As we speak, I was talking to Heath Shaw and Lee Montagna about this last night. Obviously, Heath Shaw being one of the best half-back flankers for Supercoach of all time, and it's just the place to be now when you're talking Supercoach. The couple of things I really like outside the fact that 29 touches, the 107 Supercoach, like he gets a lot of the ball. Could probably be a little bit more effective sometimes, but finding getting the ball from his teammates has not been an issue. It was actually sometimes finding the ball himself, and I think that's just going to improve with age. I think of the top, something like the top 30 defenders. I know I've mentioned this before. Wanganeen Malira was like the lowest of all the premium options from last year, finding the ball himself. So as he gets that little bit more confidence, he's going to find his own ball. We know Sinclair's missing at least one game, could potentially be 2 games, so that not only shores up his role, but there's probably really nobody else down there, especially now that Jimmy Webster's out for those 7 weeks after the hit on Simpkins. So I think the first couple of weeks he could absolutely go massive. Maybe teams will put in a strategy why Sinclair isn't there. That's a potential. But even if Sinclair comes back, I don't think it's going to hurt Wanganeen Malira in any way. They love the ball in his hands, and he kicks so often, which is awesome for Supercoach. If he's going to kick and hold, hit up targets on the wing, I want every bit of that. So 85 average from last season. What am I thinking? I feel like if there was anybody who could probably make that jump of maybe 12 points, if it is up to that sort of 97, even if it's not 100, I talked about just a moment ago about Newman at 100. So if we're looking at the guys who went sort of that range last year, well, Jake Lloyd was 10th at 95, Jaden Short was 98 at 9th. So if he could sort of get around, even if it's just under 100, it's close enough to be, in that top sort of 8 to 10 range. And you're getting him potentially 100k cheaper than some of the other options in there as a season keeper. So I really like that. I thought he's got the last buy in there, so that's fine with my team structure the way it's set up, because Houston and Young at the moment have that round 13 buy. So I'm just trying to kind of mix it up a little bit there. And all those kind of things you are trying to think of. So it's I think round the only danger there is potentially because Collingwood have that round 15 buy as well. So that's 2 players I'm missing from that week. So I've got to be a little bit mindful of that. But as long as I haven't loaded up on other sort of Bulldogs Saints players, potentially Daicos could even move into the midfield. So I can accommodate that. But I don't mind having 2 players from the one line for round 15 and round 13. And then I've just got to be mindful of who I have in defence for round. And it'll probably be a round 14 option, as you'll see later. So trying to not just think about the early buys, but the later buys as well, which there hasn't been as much talk about this season. I know we usually are drumming that in from day one, but because it's just the round 0 setup, I think we're all focused on these early buys. All right, so then we get into the rookies. I have had D'Ambrosio in from Hawthorn a little bit. I didn't mind his games through the preseason, and I thought that was probably the better option, the safer option than Williams. But just because of the way I've had to kind of structure my team, I needed to find money somewhere. There's probably enough rookies now in defence that I've got, in a perfect world, not play them on field. But I think there's enough confidence that I can have a couple spots for the rookies. D'Ambrosio is in 10% teams. Very interesting that Zach Williams is in 40. Yes, Williams will be playing round 0. We get a free look at him, and he could go well, but I really think he'll be managed into the season. So I'm a little worried about going there. I would have preferred the D'Ambrosio pick. I know some people are saying because, Amon, there's a couple other Hawks halfbacks there, but I think D'Ambrosio looked like he was getting a little bit more up the ground. So Amon came back in and scored a 96, but D'Ambrosio at 77 still took the 6 marks. Probably didn't have as much of an impact on scoring chains, and maybe it's just because Hawthorn struggled a little bit, but he'll get his moments like that. So why couldn't he sort of be sort of a 70 to 80 guy, which does have some appeal, and that's not the worry of the injury history like Zach Williams. So if you're going to go that player, and if I can find the extra money to get up, I am tempted to put that at D5. He's the one that's bounced back and forward. But for now, for the rookies, I have Josh Gipkus, and I might even put this by ownership percentage because this will be easier. So I didn't talk about Sheasel. That's probably the only other primo I haven't mentioned. I've got Sheasel and a couple of keepers. I really do like him. The only issue with me is they've got a few half-backs. Like we know Luke McDonald's going back there. McCurcher will play sometime. But the big one is Zach Fisher. He's back fit and it was flying the other day. So does Sheasel get moved around a little bit? That is my only concern with it. But I have been tempted at a $5.50 price as well. But you just can't fit all these guys in, but I've got no issue with people picking him. So Josh Gipkus there at 52% is my D5. There's a perfect world. I'd rather Gipkus playing, being on my bench. It's a little bit more of an expensive bench option. He's going to have good games, bad games because he is playing key defence. And he could potentially be Richmond's number one lockdown defender. I think Young plays more lockdown, where Gipkus, they will let him fly for his intercept marks. And then obviously you've got Grimes down there at the moment. Only in the 29 Dream Team, but had the 62 Supercoach the other day. Probably the big thing for him is he actually he only took the one mark. So he is a good intercept marker. So there will be games where he'll clunk 2 or 3 intercept marks, which is gold for Supercoach. And even if like the way it sometimes goes up, he'll take maybe a contested one. So that's kind of maximum points. So I could see him definitely going. Some weeks he might get that sort of 80 or 90 game. Other weeks he might be sort of playing more lockdown and get a 30. So it'll be up and down. But yeah, if so many people are going to own him anyway, I think he's a fine option, especially rounds 2, 3, 5, and 6. Just hopefully one of those weeks is the week where he gets like a 20, 30 and it drops out anyway. With those games being best 18, and then hopefully in the other games that's where he's getting his 80 or 90. So I don't think you can sort of go wrong with Gipkus there as your sort of D5 or D6 depending on how you're wanting to do it. All right, the next one, and this guy's come in, Zachy Reid, 43% own. Not only had a really solid preseason outing, we know how much the Bombers like him. Top 10 pick from only a few years ago, so they obviously want to get games into him. He had those horrible run with injuries. He did take the 7 marks, had the 15 touches for the 80 Supercoach. But the big thing is, obviously, unfortunately for Essendon, Ridley went down with a quad, same quad as last time, looking about 4 weeks. So I think they'd still play Reid if Ridley was there anyway, but we know there's 4 weeks where Rids is not there, so Reid's just completely locked in. He's got a free run at that position, and hopefully the young fella does well. And even when Ridley comes back, somebody else gets pushed out, and it's not Reid. But you couldn't get a better opportunity for the young fella in there. So I've got a bit more confidence in him than Gipkus to actually be on field early. But yeah, he's very much locked in for now. So the next one I've got is. And I did upgrade this. And this is Howes for Melbourne. So the thing with Howes is he has been confirmed to be playing in round 0. So he's the one that could potentially change just because we get a free look at him. And if he goes really poorly and gets dropped, well, then that's an easy one to drop out. But for now at 123, it's easy to have him in there, especially as a couple of the other options are either his price or cheaper that I'll mention in a second. But he didn't do anything wrong in the preseason. And the fact that Melbourne, going to give him the berth in a big game first up, that's got to have some confidence in it. And any player that will get a free look at. So if he goes sort of maybe 50, 60, we'll have a little bit more confidence in going with him. We always like those sort of cheap defenders. He only had the 6 touches, couple marks, 44 Supercoach, but the hope is he can push up a little bit more than that. And if he doesn't work out, well, it's an easy swap to 2 of the guys that I don't have, and I'll mention them in a second. And the last one is Young Phillips from Hawthorn, who just got picked up in the supplement period. We saw Kamamiti last year, get picked up in the same way. So the Hawks, with their injuries, needed a defender. 102k defender is going to get some opportunities in there. And he was solid enough first up. He took 6 marks, 10 touches, and had the 56 Supercoach points. I don't think we can go we can be too picky and choosy. If there's a guy there at 102k, they're the ones that are going to make maximum cash. So if he comes out with a couple of 60s early in the year, he could bolt up 50, 60k in no time. And the job security, it's reasonably there. So just because of the amount of injuries they have. If he doesn't come up, as I said, there's a couple other options that are highly owned. One there, outside the fact that I could rearrange and get D'Ambrosio in there and push those rookies, one of those rookies out, but I don't have Nick Caulfield in there at the moment. Again, he looks sold enough. He could potentially come in, 14 touches, 6 marks. My only worry is because the Dogs have so many halfbacks options. There's talk that Caleb Daniel could be pushed out or even made the sub. Bailey Dell, you've got Johannesson, Bailey Williams, and I'm sure I'm missing one or two others. They also are playing Bramble in there, who they've picked up from Hawthorn. So he was playing back pocket the other day. It's kind of where they fit in. And then you've got Taylor Duray, who's in their leadership group. So abundance of sort of halfbacks. So I kind of want to see how the Dogs are named first week before I sort of jump on that. And he's so highly owned at 58%. We know they got him over from St Kilda. High pick back there for them back in the day. So potentially, if he's there locked in and named on field, it's an easy swap maybe to House to Caulfield being the same price. The other one I don't mind is I think it's Sean Maker from St Kilda. And he was in my team up until last night. Last night there is Ari Sean Maker, currently in 6% of teams. Looked pretty solid in that first hit out. The Saints do have their own injury concerns, and obviously, as we've talked about with Webster now being out, he had the 16 touches, 11 marks, which was massive. Did turn the ball over, had 83 AFL fantasy points, but only the 60 Supercoach. But you're going to get that from a young fella. The thing that probably made me change about that was talking to Montagna, and he was saying, probably don't pick him. Battle's going to come in. Don't think he makes their best sort of 18. And I don't kind of want to pick rookies who are sort of in that lined up who could potentially be the sub, because that's just going to kill their cash-making generation. So if the Saints, another person goes down from them, then I'd be probably more confident. So he's still on the watch list. But at the moment, I've got more confidence in job security of those other guys. All right, moving on to the mids. So there's been a few chop and changes in the mids. I've probably tried to, I've probably played around with this structure more than any other position. At one time I had sort of 6 primos, I've gone down to sort of 3, tried 4, 5. So there's been a bit of mix with that. The first one is the superstar himself, and I'll put this by average to start off with, and that's Bont, currently in 43%. He is the captain option each week. The worry was maybe that preseason fitness, was struggling a little bit, but came back 32 positions the other day, 135 Supercoach, 8 tackles, which we just love. He's the vice captain option most weeks in there. So the fact that he got through unscathed, he is in locked and loaded, and unless something happens from an injury point of view, he is not changing. The second one is the next Bulldog player, and I've got Libba in there. A little bit worried just because the age factor, and a lot of these players don't sort of back up as well. So potentially I could move him with a little bit of cash in the bank to either up or down. But he has done nothing wrong in the preseason. Missed a goal too, so that 136 Supercoach could have been even higher against the Hawks. 7 tackles. We know he's a tackling machine, but it's sort of the him and the Bont show in that midfield. And then they've got Treloar and young Sanders. You've still got the McRaes and potentially Daniel. Ed Richards was the other one I was thinking about from halfback point of view. So they've got so many options that they can put in the midfield and on the wing, and they've also brought in James Harms too. So, but Libba's the one, like you can move Bont forward. Libba doesn't move. He is in those centre bounces. So he had 26 CBAs, which I think was the most on the ground. Maybe him and maybe Newcomb were in there the most. But it's just he looks primed to go again. The Bulldogs in for a big year, and I think the question mark is could somebody at that age continue to do after having a career best year? No reason why he can't. So he's in at the moment. It's an easy one to go down if I want a little bit more cash as well. So people I'm looking at, I've had Track in there because I thought Track was awesome preseason. Now the question mark, how does Track go with Clary being named against the Swans? Can't discount Clary. the guy's obviously a superstar when going, so we get a free look at him against Sydney. And the other one is another buy player in Goulden, which I could definitely fit in there. He was flying again the other night. And a player that I do have high owned in draft just because their injuries. He went 133 in Supercoach, and it would not surprise me at all if Goulden's top 3 in Supercoach this season. So the only problem with somebody like him is he's got that same buy as Daicos, and now I'm trying to cover too many people. And is it really worth it against, say, a Libba, for example, who doesn't have a buy till round 15? Is it too many round 15 players? And that's probably the thing I've got to start thinking about, because I talked about earlier with Daicos and Wanganeen Malira, how many of these sort of round 15 players can I potentially have? So I'm kind of monitoring that in regards to a primo, but you're usually going to have sort of 6-7 if you think you want full premium at some point, which will be 22 premiums. There's 4 buys, so do the maths on that. What's that? You're going to have a couple of rounds, which you're going to have 6, and a couple of rounds you're going to have 5 for your 22. So at the moment, that's 4 people from round 15. So I think I can live with that situation. Third person, and this guy hasn't dropped down my team once this preseason. He's only in 17%, which is really interesting, and that is Dawson from the Adelaide Crows. Laird's now actually dropped to 6%, which is a bit surprising because he's a gun, but it looks like Laird's probably the more likely one to push forward a little bit. They've got Crouch coming back, and like he looked pretty solid the other day. You've got Sam Berry, and he had a massive preseason match. He scored 115. You've got Rankin, who they want to put up around the ball. You've got Rochelle. The way I see it with the Crows is Dawson is the captain. So he's playing in the guts. If they need to move him, or more the case, Dawson moves himself. And I say this all the time, the quarterback role. So he'll drop himself back and potentially take intercept marks. Last year he dropped in and took kickouts. When the game was on the line a couple of times, he moved himself forward to try to be the man to take the mark and kick the winning goal. So Dawson sort of has free license, like some of those superstars at other clubs. They just do what they need to do to make sure the game's won. So I don't see Dawson sort of, pushing to a half-forward flank or anything like that. I could see Rory Laird doing that, and sort of like Sam Walsh was doing last season, start on the half-forward flank. You might have Rankin start in the middle, Rankin push it forward, and then you have Laird push towards the contest. So that wouldn't surprise me at all. So Laird will still get enough tackles and ball. But yeah, I'm more safety with Dawson playing in that role. So yeah, he hasn't changed, and unless I'm really stretched for cash and I want to go back down to say a Zach Butters just because I need that extra 10k, but I feel a lot more confident having Dawson in there. I know some people are thinking he's probably capped at nearly where he's at, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if he could push that 120 mark this year. He's in that right age bracket. And if the Crows are going to win more games, which the projection is, the media over in South Australia definitely are saying the Crows need to be one of the teams pushing into the 8, and not just the 8, but sort of that top 6. Who's going to do it? It's going to be Dawson. So, yeah, I'm happy to ride that train. All right, so now this is where it gets a bit more creative. So just the 3 full-on premiums. Up to the other day, I did have sort of 6. Again, we've talked about Goulden. I would love Tom Green. Tom Green could be still the one that may come in. I think that's more like we were talking last night. A few of the guys are really bullish on LDU. Did this last year, had a slow preseason and just burst out of the blocks. That wouldn't surprise me at all. But again, he does miss games, and I feel like LDU could be one of those guys. Again, could go 125, 130 for a period, and then he misses a game or gets injured or something like that. So a little bit of FOMO there, maybe because what he could do as a scorer. Butters is the same, but there's so many options. We went through these last night, and there's so many great midfielders. Caleb Sarong has not done anything wrong in preseason, and 10%. Tom Green, if it wasn't for that bye, he'd be locked in there for me. He just finds the ball at will. Probably doesn't score as high as he probably should with the amount of ball that he gets. The guy's getting to 30 touches for fun. And, the other night he just scored 118. If I kind of wish if those 30 touches would equate to maybe a 125 to a 130. But if he comes out and dominates against the Pies, and then with West Coast and North Melbourne on the horizon, I'm still tempted to maybe go Green. So it'd probably be more likely to be Libba down. And then I'll look at my options there. Maybe it's get to a Dunkley now that Walsh isn't available if I wanted to go to the GWS player. But yeah, I feel pretty confident with Bont, Libba, Dawson. Don't have to worry about sort of rearranging my team too much because of the buys. And yeah, as I said, the only other one is maybe Gordon, but yeah, I'm pretty confident with that. So M4 has now become Nick Martin, the Essendon midfielder, another player I wrote about the other day. So with Martin, he has now taken over the role where he is playing half-back. The Bombers do obviously have a lot of half-backs. Redmond kind of in between of that tall half-back guy who still manages to sort of average 95 most years around that mark. We know how good McGrath can be, former number one pick. But Martin seems to be the guy this season. Now, the only problem is he starts the year as a midfielder, which is quite frustrating. But I'm pretty confident he will pick up that defender status by that sort of round 6-7 period when they get added, so it's round 6 this year, which will Richmond and Melbourne will have the bye. So after round 6, that's when the first dual positions will be added, and that's probably the appeal that some people are going Elliot Yeo, because Martin will get dual position, Elliot Yeo gets traded out, Martin goes back into the defence, and that's sort of why I kind of don't want to go that D5, D6 premium, because if you think Daicos, Houston, Young, Wanganeen, Malira there just for myself, I'm going to probably want Stewart as well, and then if it was Sicily, drops down cash, it does make it hard because I probably want Martin. I think if Martin is playing in that role, he can be one of the sort of higher guys, so it's not trying to have too many of them. And that is sort of a little bit of the balance, even having, say, a Wanganeen Malira instead of, say, a Yeo, because at least it's easier to trade Yeo out when Martin gets back there and to fit in a Stewart in the Sicily. So there is a bit of a balance with that. Maybe there's a little bit of thought because Daicos and Young will have dual position, because Young should pick up midfield. I can kind of play around with that as my M8 and still fit all these defenders in there. But yeah, if you're already starting kind of with 5 defenders, and then somebody does crush, like Martin goes off, and then somebody gets really cheap, you might be hamstrunging yourself too much, because I think there will be some value there for the defence. So I can't ignore him. Some people are thinking Martin did start on the wing. It did look like that early, but I think that was Sardis, who kind of looks a bit like Martin. But for the next 3 quarters, he was mostly in defence, and he was kind of playing that short Houston role. He's got no defensive thoughts how he's playing. It's about him getting the ball up forward and connecting with those wingers and the centremen, sitting sort of 40, 50 metres off. He did kick the couple of goals because, again, that no attention and can run past and bomb that long goal. So they want to get the ball in his hands because he's such a great kick. And that's different where, say, maybe it's a lot of teams are playing that defensive winger, so they're the ones that have got to kind of drop back and help out defend the forward. So Martin had full license. First real game playing that role, he had 28 possessions, but more importantly, 11 marks. So yeah, managed to. I think it's sort of like keep a bit of width in there in the defence as well. They look for him for that chip pass, and then he's the one that explodes from defence. So it's going to be hard to ignore him. There's a couple other players in that price range. I'm not as hot about Matt Crouch at the moment. I just think maybe time on ground might affect him a little bit, but yeah, there's no reason why he probably couldn't go 105. Ollie Wines is in that range too. I have had Wines in. He won the Brownlow in 2021. There was a period there from round 3 onwards. He averaged 116, and he had like the 76% again time on ground. So 19 CBA. So he's one I'm kind of considering. They've got the awesome Fawcett in there with Horn, Francis, Butters, and Rosie. I think Wines is probably the preferred in their midfielder, where Rosie, Horn, Francis, and Butters can all rotate through the forward line. So him at 460 is definitely going to be under consideration. So for whatever reason, Martin wasn't to line up in the back line, or wouldn't be named there, or something else happened, very easy to go down to a Wines at that option. There's also Jack Steele at 520, who has spent time in my team as well. We know what the guy can do. He's done in the past, where he's been one of the best midfielders for us. Tuke Miller, again, slightly a little bit more at 545. So Tuke's in 23% of teams. Let's just see what Steele's currently at. But this was a great debate last night. So Steele's only 13%. The worry about Steele, even though he looks really fit and trim, and he was still laying tackles, he was struggling to break a few tackles on the weekend, got caught by McKercher. So I think that's put a few people off there. Took's a little bit worried for me just because of the early bye, and I don't know how he's going to go under Dimmer. Damien Hardwick's known for not sort of spreading the load through the midfielders. Even in Dusty's best year, career year, he went 119. So I think Took might be capped at 110. But yeah, that seemed to be the arguments last night, who you are going at either that most people was that sort of M4, M5 position. Some people a little bit deep. But there are an abundance of rookies now that we can kind of choose for our rest of the midfield. So I think, you could still potentially go M6 if you really wanted to, with like a Martin Wines type. But yeah, it's trying to fit in some of these other players, and which I'll mention in a moment. Alrighty, so the one guy that did come in because of Webster, a bit like Wanganeen Malira, because of his Webster getting the 7 weeks, is Riley Bonner. So he's currently only in 7% of teams. I also played around with sort of Thompson Dow there, but I'm more worried when all the Richmond players come back. But now with Bonner crossing over from Port Adelaide, and with Webster being out, there's a clear role for him coming off that half-back line. In the practice match, he had 30 touches, 7 marks, and ran up and kicked a goal, 127 Supercoach. Now, I don't think he's going to do that every week, but there's definitely enough of a role there where he could, I don't see it as a keeper, but for a small period of time, could definitely kick, maybe an average like an 85. It's not completely out of the question. And then, if he was able to do that, he's definitely going to make some catch and able to be a stepping stone. I kind of prefer him as a stepping stone than somebody who might be, say, a 250, 240 guy who, might not exactly have the points scoring capacity compared to like a half-back flanker doing that. And we've seen this even in games where with Bonner over at Port Adelaide, there was like last year he averaged a 50, but included in that was like a 3, a 29, a 26 and a 30. So when he actually got a full crack at it, he scored an 84, 75, 65, 62. It's not, some of them aren't like setting the world on fire, but then the year before, he had a period there. He's had 124, 80, 118, 111, and an 85. So yeah, he has the potential to have games where he goes big. So if they've got and even going the previous year before that, he went 98, 91, 82, 78 in sort of a 4 or 5 week period. So yeah, if he does have this crack at it, and it looks like he's going to now because of their injuries and suspensions, I think there's potential there that he could get on a bit of a roll, make some quick cash. If he could jump up to 400,000, sort of why we're looking to upgrade around that round sort of 6 mark. And I think the perfect world would be, because Goulden does have that bye in round 5, that is one way to be looking at it. Like maybe if Bonner could get himself up to sort of 400, early 400s, and it's only sort of an extra 200k to jump on Goulden, we might be able to cash out a rookie by then. Bonner could become that like a Sydney midfielder there. So something to consider. Next is my rookie players. So there's plenty of them at the moment, and you can see they're highly owned. I've got, and I'll kind of talk about them all as one. So in the midfield, I've got at the moment Harley Reid, just because I can't fit him in the forward line. I've got Colby McKercher and Riley Sanders. Sanders had the 30 touches the other day. I don't think he's going to be playing solely midfield. He's probably going to start off the half forward line. We do know Treloar seems to always have some hammy issues each year, so I think he'll get more of an opportunity. But going into the season, definitely the thought would have been, it's going to be Libba, Bont, Treloar, and then they're going to have, your Bailey D, Caleb Daniel, Richards sort of go through there. But the form in his preseason just shows how skillful this kid is, and why North Melbourne wanted to get him through the NGA. Colby McKercher, similar in a way, but like he was meant to be rumoured to spend a bit more time around half back. The worry there is because of the amount of North Melbourne midfielders and half backs, that he's probably not going to get as huge of a role, but he still found it 18 times, laid 3 tackles. Like, he's good enough to get sort of between 60 and 70, even at that expensive price. And Harley Reid, like, yeah, there hasn't been much talked about him so far. The Western Australian media are talking about him as the Great White Hope, but he's on like every paper over there. And his first real crack of midfield, he had 20 touches, so 88 Supercoach. So I think you need all 3 of them in. It depends on how you want to set up your team. If you want Reid up in the forward line, which is probably, if there was room up my forward line, that's where he'd be right now. And there's the other guy who I've currently got at M9 and as well as M10 that some people are looking at playing on the field. So I've got the Hawks player in Huswaite. So he 184, a little bit more expensive than I want on my bench, but it's just kind of how I've structured my team. I think he's probably got a little bit more of the question for me just because the amount of Hawks sort of midfielders, but because Will Day is out, they do rate him. There will be early opportunities for him, but they've got, McDonald, McKenzie, Ward, so a lot of young players that can sort of go through there, but I think they're going to give Huswaite some opportunities. It might not be every week the huge time on ground that we need in CBAs where he got the 84 the other day. Because he did get 73% time on ground with 14 CBAs. That could drop back a little bit. He might have to move to a wing or a half forward. But at the same time, he's another young fella. They want to get as much game time in as possible as the Hawks continue to develop this group going forward. So I've got enough confidence with starting him, but maybe not as much on field. I kind of want to rotate players around like that. Potentially with the best 18, you could start him with a little bit more confidence, and if he has a poor week, it'll just drop out. But I think that gives me a best chance to maximise points. Matt Roberts is in 21% of teams. He could potentially pick up defender status at some point. The worry is a little bit because they do have the guys like Jake Lloyd, Blakey, and Braden Campbell. So kind of where does he kind of fit in that back pocket halfback? But we saw last year that the first opportunity they got to bring him in, they put him in the midfield. They do have a couple players missing, as we know, with Mills, Taylor Adams out. So players like Rowbottom are going to get more opportunity. But I think even Roberts may even get some time through there if need be. The worry is he could be a little bit of a sub candidate, but I think they've got enough faith that they want to put him on field. He scored the 100 points the other day in Supercoach. Again, maybe if you're doing Huswaite at M8 and Roberts at M9, there's potential to move those guys around. And that's why, as I said, I've got Reid there because I can swap sort of Reid up the forward line if I need to and play one of them on field. And there's options. I've got the ability to maybe loophole if one of the players gets dropped from my forward line or my midfield. So I can see people tinkering with different ways of this, but I think it's another rookie that we kind of do need. And the last one is the Geelong young gun in Jai Clark. 50% of teams, you just need this guy. And the big thing was because Cam Guthrie went down, so I think it's too hard to kind of leave him out. He, especially on the weekend, he had the 17 touches, the 4 tackles. He did get some, I think he ended up getting like 5 free kicks, which obviously helped boost his score. But they're talking about the next Joel Selwood in that midfield. That's why they did the deal with the Suns to get him in through that number 7 pick. So now I've got enough confidence with Jai Clark being there on my bench. Potentially, if you wanted like a sharp type, I could see that happening. A Weir as well, but I don't know how. I wasn't overly impressed with Sharp's game. Just the 10 possessions and a goal. Weir just annoys me a little bit because he does have that early bye, but potentially could be in line for that wing role while Finn Callaghan is out. The Giants were actually a real interesting one the other night. They had young Thomas play, and he looked pretty good as well. So you could see them floating some of these guys through the wing and the half forward, but we get a free look at them, and if they become a must pick, well, that's easy for us to do. The ruck line, simple. Gawn, Grundy, Naismith. 60%, 55%, 35%. The only consideration I've probably got is I've had Cherry in and out just because 80k cheaper than Grundy, doesn't have a bad fixture to start off as well. Sometimes that 80k has been handy for me, but it's really hard to ignore Grundy. I know I didn't have the greatest match the other day. all reports is it's probably not going to be Laddams sharing as much time with him. But if it does get that round 0 match and the teams come out and Laddams is named, well, it will give us a bit of food for thought. But we get a free look at Grundy, and it's much easier for me to go Grundy down to Cherry if I want to do that. 13% are on English. There's quite a few content creators on English. We know how much he dominated the other day. It's just the question of, do I want to spend the extra 200 and nearly 40k to get from Grundy to English? As good as the English is, yeah, it is a lot of money, which does affect my team, because all of a sudden that might be I've got to drop, say, Bont down or a Libba down to another mid-pricer. But I guess if I move money around, it could be Libba down to Wines, Grundy up to English. Is that so bad? No, potentially not. So I don't think he can't be completely discounted. But that's the most popular Ruck's lineup, and it's not really changing. Gawn, I can't believe he's in 60% of teams and not 100%. He should be the most owned player. Saw him at Casey, watched him run laps at half time. He is looking so fit, so hungry this year. The general consensus last night is like Gawn's like nearly the first pick player. So if you don't have him in at the moment, please just pause this video and put him in, because he deserves to be there. And as I said, Cherry was somebody I was interested in. He did have the 85% time on ground the other day, playing sole ruck. The new hit-out rule really does help Cherry. Had the 31 hit-outs, went toe-to-toe with Marshall and looked really solid. Like, Marshall was a standard game from him, 102 points. And, I think I've said that in the past, where I think he's sort of, again, around that 116 mark. But I don't mind the Cherry pick either, and especially the fact that Cherry got 5 free kicks but gave away 4. There'll be games where he won't give away that many, and could have pushed that up. But so we are sport for choice. If it was AFL fantasy, I'd be saying lock in Cherry right now. But maybe for Supercoach, we have a look more at the Grundy option. But that's probably one that's sort of up in the air. But Gawn and even Naismith, I can see why some people are still wanting the R3 loophole. If you're going it, do not go Marley, go Livingston. Though Livingston didn't look great the other day playing, but if he's not going to get games, so he had a -4, so I don't expect him to really play. He's a better loophole option because the West Coast Eagles play later in the round more than North Melbourne do, so it makes it easier to loophole your players around. All right, the forward line, and this was the big change this morning. In comes the Fremantle second ruck, we'll say. And it'll be interesting to see how much his percentage has jumped up. But Luke Jackson already up to 25%. So I was having Fisher at F1. I did say the other day Fisher was my F1 for overall points this year as the forward. But Jackson was a big question mark because it depended on Darcy. And what happened? Darcy out injured, looking somewhere maybe 4 weeks, could be even longer. And we know what Jackson does when Darcy isn't there. So I think he averaged 87 while Darcy was in the team, 118 when he isn't there. A perfect world for us would be if Darcy didn't come back by round 5 or 6, because Freo's ruck draw really opens up. So he starts with Big O and then Cherry, Riley O, and then one of the Carlton rucks. But round 5 they play Port Adelaide, so that'll be Soldo. Round 6 play West Coast. So it's a really good draw if Darcy does miss the first 6 matches. Even so, there's enough points there on offer for those first 4, even if he comes down, that he should. I think if he averaged what he did in the first 4 rounds, like what he did last year, and then even if Darcy came back and played the entire season, which is unlikely just because the way Darcy does miss games, I think he'd average like 93 for the year, and that would be enough for him to potentially this year be a top 6 in the forward line. It would be a little bit less than his value at the moment, but he's too hard to ignore. And if we look at the averages from last year, Jackson there at 97, and we already know Dusty's missing round 0. So Caleb Daniel, who's in and out of that side, so we're talking that 93 mark, and that's top 6 anyway. So a lot of confidence in picking him. Rest of the forward line, Zach Fisher, again, I'm surprised he's not one of the most picked players. I know it's an awkward price, 29%, 378. And the only thing I can say about this is the last 3 years, North Melbourne, Aaron Hall, Jack Zeeble. Zeeble had a a year where I think he averaged 106 and then a 98. Aaron Hall had that massive year about 3 years ago. They just loved putting the ball in his hand. We know, Hall was injury prone, so it's kind of the same thing. This is how North Melbourne do. They get a player like a Fisher or a Hall from from another club into that position, and they just let them loose on half back. So Aaron Hall in 2022, he averaged 97, but his injury-adjusted score was 109, and then 2021 was 105, injury-adjusted 114. That's all those points gone out of the back line. Somebody's going to do it. We know North Melbourne aren't going to be a top-rated team this year. I actually tipping them for either 17th, 18th again. And most North supporters I've talked to have no disappointment in that. And it's like one more year, getting a high draft pick, great. And I said before, Zeeble. So Zeeble's adjusted last year was 95. In 2021, he scored 107 playing in that same role too. So do I expect Zach Fisher to go like 110? Probably not, but why couldn't he go 100 and be F1? I don't see any reason why not, as long as he stays fit. And that's the only issue with it. But why he's fit in there, I think he had 36 touches the other day for his 132. And even in the match sim, it was like Fisher kick out, get the ball back, kick it to LDU, get the ball back, kick the ball. So he's having 3 touches in a play. Again, he should be in so many more sides than what he is at the moment. My third option is Nat Fyfe. Yes, the injuries worry me. If he was over 300, I wouldn't have him, but at 280, it's too hard to ignore. He's a 2-time Brownlow medalist. The guy's a gun. Probably handballing a little bit more than what I'd like at the moment, but 19 CBAs, had the 75% time on ground. A little worried that he could get subbed out late in games, but he looks really fit. And I think to start the season, they're going to have him in there, not only because Freo are going to be trying to win games, but if Freo struggle, Longmuir's in trouble. So they need their best players in there. Nat Fyfe's been their best player for a long time. I've got him in there. The next one's Jordan, currently in 49%. Once Taylor Adams went down, Jordan was the obvious. The Swannies have brought him across from the Ds. Jordan's points are down just because of he was such a sub-affected guy at Melbourne. Melbourne had so many midfield options. It was hard for him to break in. How are you going to break in when you've got Viney, Oliver, Petrarca, Brayshaw running through there? His Supercoach last year was 40-80 average, but his adjusted score, if we take out those sub games, was 62. So there's 14 points meat on the bone just there, and he's going to get more opportunity. He had average 70 for the year before, and on the weekend had the 31 touches, 115 Supercoach. I don't think we can go wrong at 275. The next one is a real debate, and this is why I sort of had some edit with my team, and I don't know really which way to go here. I've got Harms in at the moment. There's 3 options, I think, if you want to go another mid-pricer. So you've got Harms, who's currently in 12% of teams. I've got Billings, who's in 26% of teams, and I don't also mind McKenzie from Hawthorn. And he's in, and he's a massive pot at 2% of teams. So if you're kind of looking for that extra mid-pricer, you could potentially look at all of them. Some people aren't going Fyfe, and they are going Billings and Harms, but I think all these guys are pretty popular. Harms could potentially be the 4th, 5th midfielder, depending on how they want to play Sanders. Bringing him across from the Melbourne, they're going to give him opportunity. 17 touches and a goal the other day for 74. I think that's about Harms' sort of go. Sort of 70s. I'll take that as a forward to make cash. He's going to play. He's going to be best 18 starting on the ground. Maybe he comes off the bench, but he's not going to be the sub option. So I've got more confidence in him, say, at the moment than Lazaro or Windsor or Zane Dersma. Dersma being a forward. Windsor is named, but could he potentially be, pushed into that sub role at some point? Do other players come back affect him? So, a little bit worried about that. And Lazaro probably didn't have his best game the other day, so that had some concerns. And just because, North Melbourne actually have quite a few options run through there. There is some worry. Maybe now that Simpkins out does open up more time for him. Still had the 21 touches, but didn't use the ball great. But if with the Huswaite there, I could potentially go Huswaite down to Lazaro, cross him over to Lazaro or Windsor. Could easily go Harms down, and that gives me more money. So, I get it. We get a free look at Billings, we get a free look at Windsor, and this is why round 0 is so important this year, because our teams can change depending on how those guys go, because we sort of know not only their role, what they're going to score, but what their price calculations will be coming into round 2 instead of round 3 this year. Okay, so, and then my last 3 spots, no surprise here. Again, why is this guy in only 48% of teams? I wrote about him the other day, Alex Sexton. Some are thinking he could be Charlie Constable this year, but Dimmer said from day one, he's going to be the new Daniel Rioli down there, taking kick-ins, had 31 touches, 11 marks, 125 Supercoach. I wished he didn't go so well so early. I was really hoping he'd start the year at sort of like 20%, and then people would have to trade in on him. But yeah, this guy, get him in, and not just in, but he can be on field. We do get a free look, so if something massively changes, again, it's an easy option to swap out, but I don't see anything changing there. I feel like he could probably go 80s, but 133k, would take that in a heartbeat. And again, like Fisher, Sexton's going to pick up dual position, so they're going to be defenders. So we're going to have all these defender options that we can have to move around, but we would rather Fisher and Sexton in our forward line just because the forwards aren't as great this season. And finishing off with my bench, no surprise, Darcy Williams. Montagna was talking about him last night. The kid's a freak. I think he won the time trial or something. In his first season, 50% own. Was linking up so well the other day. I know it was only North Melbourne they were playing, but for a young fella to do what he was doing, had the 24 possessions, 10 marks out on that wing. Also missed a goal for 106. Like, he could have gone even higher. 79% game time, so it wasn't like he was out there for 96% or something like that. Still sort of working him in it. He needs to be in more teams as well. Darcy Wilson, lock him in. And the last one, and this is a bit of a debate here, because you've got North Melbourne, who's got Biggie New Wing, who's crossed over from Richmond, had the 87. I still think North are trying to work out their best setup. They've got Toby Pink, Aiden Core to come back, so who are sort of their tools, but I don't think he's a bad option. I still don't mind Cadman, because just their draw, so it depends how he goes against the Pies, but then with West Coast and North afterwards, there is a bit of temptation to go there. You got Laurie from the D's. You've even got sort of, as I said, Thomas from West Coast. You've got Simpson from Freo, but the one I like more than anyone is Buku Karmas, and we'll chuck him in there. Currently in only 2% of sites. And the reason I like Buku, we know what he used to do at the forward line, but he only had the 10 touches, but took 8 marks playing defence. Bulldogs don't really have that centre-half back, full-back lockdown. Well, we know they've got Lockie Jones, but they really need help from someone else. We all were hoping maybe Norton pushed back, and as Ugle Hagen mixed up with a couple of those other young talls that they've got coming through. But yeah, it looks like at the moment it's going to be Buku. Did nothing wrong to suggest that he won't be the guy there. At 123k will be another forward who would pick up defender status as well. So we're going to have a few of them. So yeah, that's where I'm looking at for my team at the moment. Round 0 will potentially change a few things. But yeah, no, I can't. I'm pretty solid and pretty happy with how I've got that. As I talked about, I've got Harley Reid in the midfield. Very easily, I could swap Reid and Wilson around, and I could put Reid on the into the forward line if Harms or Sexton. If I wanted to drop Harms down again for one of those other rookies, they'll give me some extra cash. I've got that ability to do it as well. So yeah, no, that's pretty solid. And it'd be interesting to see what you guys think of that, and also what you guys are thinking as well. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll talk soon. Bye.